start us off. So everybody's saying that they can hear us clearly, which is great. So I'm just going to slide us back to the beginning here. And thank you all very much for joining us this evening. We're ready to start now. It's just after 6 o'clock. And thank you for joining us for the Meaningful Networking Student to Stemette webinar, that program, the Deutsche Bank program. And I'm very pleased to welcome this evening Professor Dame Wendy Hall, computer scientist. Wendy is Director of Web Science Institute at the University of Southampton. And we're going to be listening to her first of all, and then we're going to be listening to Lizzie and Leigh, who are going to give their ideas about networking. So we're very keen to hear about some information from Wendy, and I'm going to hand over to her now. Thank you, Wendy.
So you're going to change the slide to my first one I was going to talk to. So I'm sorry to be so disorganised, everyone. It's lovely to talk to you. I'm actually on holiday. You can see just behind me, I look so old in this webcam, the stairs behind me. I'm at home. I'm sitting in the study at home, and I'm sort of on holiday. I've been out with friends in the New Forest, and I've got a barbecue tonight. So I'm quite relaxed, but not at all prepared for this. So I was asked to talk about networking, and it's something, I guess I was born to network. I'm a very gregarious person, but I don't have long, and I need to just tell you 2 or 3 stories, I think is the best. I would urge you all to listen to I've just done Desert Island Discs. It went out on at the end of July, and if you look at the BBC podcast, you'll be out, and you can hear my whole story on that and the music that I like. But I started out as a mathematician, and when I was a mathematician, I didn't really realise there weren't any women doing what I was doing. I was just interested in the maths, and there were some women around, and this was back in the 70s. And then I moved, it's a long story cut short, over time into computing, and there's a memorable day I wrote my first paper with a colleague of mine, Jill Lovegrove, in 1987, which is probably long before most of you were born, about the lack of women in computing. Because we realised we got the registration list for the academic year in October as the students all came back, and we realised we had 3 years of students doing computer science at Southampton with no women at all. And we thought, is this something? Is it they don't like Southampton? What is it? Why suddenly? Because there were women on the courses before. Where have they gone? Well, why women stopped doing computing in the 80s is a story I often tell in lectures. It's all to do with personal computers and the way they were introduced, and a whole long story about how they became toys for boys. But the thing was that we wanted to find out whether other universities were having the same issue, and we realised there was this network on this new thing called email, which in the 1980s was really quite new, and it was called Women in Computing. It was the WIC network. It was started by a lady called Carol Goebel at Manchester, a good friend of mine now, and I can't remember how we heard about it, word of mouth I think, or someone may have sent us an email, and we started talking to people on this network, mainly other women lecturers in computer science in UK universities. And we realised it wasn't just us. We realised it had suddenly been a slump in the number of girls studying computing. It's gone down very quickly and actually hasn't recovered much since, but that's another whole story. This is about computer science, and I got then, interested in how these networks work, because we found out so much information, and we actually, through this network, started the first Women in Computing conference for the following year. I was very much involved in the organisation of that, and there was a WIC network that ran for a long time. There's a whole story about how I'm a bit hesitant to say, but there's always an issue when you're talking about networking about whether you let the men in, and many of you are going to Grace Hopper, or some of you are going to the Grace Hopper conference, which I'll come back to. That's run by the Anita Borg Institute. Anita Borg was a very famous computer scientist who set up, the first thing she did was set up an email network. She was trying to find out, she worked for HP, she was trying to find out why there weren't any women doing computing. And they made that a women-only network. And that still is. That email network, there is a women-only, so women can talk about things that matter to them in terms of mentoring and particular issues to do with childcare and all those things that we sometimes have a different perspective to the guys. But the WIC network that I was involved with initially, it was a mixed network. The male and female academics were involved, and the men took it off in a very different type of conversation to what the women wanted. And so in the end, it died as a network. And I learned lessons there. Actually, you have to know what the network is for, and what you're trying to do. There's lots of things I could tell you, but I became more and more interested. Although I wanted to be well known for being this, I became more and more interested in why women weren't attracted to computing or science and engineering generally in the 1990s. And I also became attracted to join the British Computer Society, which is my professional society for computing in the UK. And I learnt the power of networking through that. People say to me, why should I join the BCS or the society in my area? And actually, it's all about the networking. And that, of course, is mixed networking. It's about getting to know people with influence from different areas. So I'm an academic. I met lots of people from industry and government through the BCS. As I say in my Desert Island District recording, anything I join, I end up organising. So I never dreamt I would go this way, but I eventually became president of the British Computer Society. I was only the second woman to become president, and the first was Dame Stephanie Shirley, who's a great friend and mentor of mine now, and I'm in awe of her as a woman and what she's done in terms of building up her company and the philanthropy she does now. But it was an amazing time for me, and I got to know so many different people. I supported Sue Black to set up BCS Women, and so I've actually, in all the things I've done, I've always supported the setting of a women's network within the big network, because just every so often, I think you talk to people with the same perspective as you, although most of the time I don't want to be just in a women's network, but every so often I think it just helps you talk about the stuff where there's a lack of confidence or lack of understanding of how things work, and you don't want to make an idiot of yourself in front of your work colleagues, and you can maybe ask the women in the network a question you couldn't maybe ask your boss, and it's also a way. All the research shows, and my experience shows, that the most important thing when you're young and starting out, and even when you get to my old age, is a mentor. Being able to talk to somebody who's been there, done it before you, and can give you advice. Doesn't have to be a woman. If you're a woman, it can be a man, but someone who you trust, who you can talk to on a personal level about your career. And you find those people by networking. I always think it works better to know your mentor before you start. There are mentor networks that will find you a mentor, like find you a date, but I actually have always found my mentors through networking. And of course, I went on, I've got an eye on the clock here, but I went on to be president of the Association of Computing Machinery, which is the computer society based in America, which is the biggest in the world. And that was amazing. I was the first European to be president of that, or the first person from outside America to be president of that. And again, I supported the building up of ACM women, and I set up ACM women groups in Europe and Asia, and Europe, China, and India as well as part of that. And I'm now still heavily involved in diversity. But I want to sort of wind up by saying a couple of things. One is that networking isn't just about gender, and it's really important to be involved in networks where the influential people are, whoever they are, because that's where you'll learn. You'll learn, and you'll find people who will help you get along, give you the advice, and enable you to grow as a person and in your career. And if you're going to university, help you manage your studies and think about what career you want to go on. And something like those of you who are going to Grace Hopper, Grace Hopper, if you don't know, was a famous computer scientist, Admiral Grace Hopper. She developed the programming language COBOL. She was in the US Navy. She's long dead now, but her name is given to, she was one of the formidable early pioneers of computing and was a woman. and the Anita Baldwin Institute have named their conference after her. And Grace Hopper is like networking on steroids. For those of you, it is the most amazing experience, and those of you that are going will have a fabulous time. And if you get an opportunity to go, and just go, because it is, it's about 1,500 women. The noise levels are unbelievable, but all the talking and conversations. They take over a hotel in the US, a huge, moves around the country, but the only time when they actually put lady labels on all the gentlemen's toilets, because there are 1,500 women and lots of queues for the loos, which is unusual at scientific conferences. And it just actually exemplifies the power of networking. It's actually it's very American actually in culture, and it's actually become a recruitment conference. The big high-tech companies go there and are recruiting girls from undergraduate computer science classes in the US and from around the world, but they are there to recruit the best from the female talent in the computing courses, and it's actually a great fun, and the speakers are amazing, not just computer scientists, they have astronauts and all sorts, and it's just, as I say, networking on steroids. And I think the two things to come back is networking is A, fun, and B, so such a good way to learn how to get on, and also mentoring. Find yourself someone who sort of you admire and you trust, and you think you can talk to on an individual basis, and you don't even have to ask them to officially be your mentor. Just get to know them, and in having conversations with them, having lunch with them, or whatever you do at your age, I would say have a coffee or a drink, but to chat with them, and of course I think you're going to hear later on in this conversation, increasingly this can be done online. You don't have to meet people face to face to have a good mentor, and increasingly we can do networking online as well. I mean, in the 80s when I was starting, there was no such thing as online except for email, so we had to go to meetings to meet people. I think you're very lucky these days that you don't have to do that. And when I give talks about this, my last slide is always that I think networks help us find our voice. I have this, I think that women often aren't heard in a big conversation. I still find this, even where I am and in my career and my status, is that often men won't hear what I'm saying. And I think it's honestly something to do with the tenor of our voice. And there's been some very famous comedy sketches about this, where men don't hear women, and then this happens to me so often. I'll say something in a meeting, and that people will, I don't understand that, I don't think that's a very good idea, with the comment. And then, a day or a week later, I'll have somebody come back to me and say, well, I've had this great idea, and I hear my idea coming back to me. I think, didn't you hear me say that? And I honestly think that networking helps us find our voice, because I think together we're stronger. We can give each other confidence. I think that's where I'd like to stop, actually, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Thank you. That's great. Thank you very much for sharing those thoughts. I particularly like the idea of getting to know people with influence in different areas to the areas that you might have an interest in. I think that's great. And if I get to go out to Grace Hopper, I should be making sure that I check those men's. They haven't been changed to ladies' loo, because that's an interesting one to remember, to make sure there's enough places for all those women to go to.
Is the men have to search for the toilets like women usually have to do at scientific conferences or in old engineering buildings. It's complete role reverse in that respect. There are quite a few men there, but it is really an amazing networking experience. We've tried to recreate it in Europe, but it never has quite the same feel about it as the US one does.
That's great. Does anybody do you have a time maybe, Wendy, for a question? If anybody wants to post a quick question in chat. I had posted something up just to say if anybody wanted to ask a question.
Nobody has. Everyone's very quiet today.
Very quiet. So it may be that there's some questions posted afterwards. I know that we're going to try and maybe have a continuing discussion with the mentees. Head Stemette says, Anne-Marie. Hello, Anne-Marie. She said, who's your favourite mentor? Yes.
Okay, well, I think I mentioned her. I don't really. It's often quite hard to talk about who your mentor is because it's actually quite a private thing. You don't often want to say so-and-so is my mentor in public because it is quite a private relationship in that sense. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. I've been flattered when people have stood up, ex-students of mine, or I won't, and people who are quite well known. Your mentor was Wendy, because I enjoy mentoring as much as I like having a good mentor, and it's very flattering. So I think the person I've already named would be the person. My answer to that question is named Steve Shirley, who, if you don't know about her, then read her book. She produced an autobiography last year called Letting. I can't remember. It's a pun on IT. Let It Go, I think it is. I think it's Let It Go, something like that. And the it's being the pun on IT. She is an absolute, and her story is unbelievable. It's a real rags to riches story, literally. She arrived on the Kindertransport from Germany in the Second World War with no money and couldn't speak any English. And she became the most influential woman in IT so she had to leave and she set up her own company. It became a very successful company, and she sold it for a lot of money, and she's putting all that money back into society through her philanthropy, which they have seen her talk about on the telly. She is just amazing. She scares me silly, but she's just amazing and has always been in society. And when I was elected to be the second, many years after her, 10 years after her, I suppose, and she said, Wendy, I'm going to take you out to dinner and tell you how to do it. But boy, she's been so helpful. So if you don't know Steve Shirley's story, then read her autobiography. It's quite awe-inspiring.
We'll post that link for people after, and you mentioned some other links as well, so we'll make sure we put those in there. It's been great to have you join us, and Wendy, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay. Goodbye for now. Bye-bye.
Now, bye.
Bye.
Bye. Turn off. Right. Thank you.
That's great. So we'll carry on now. And Lizzie has joined us. Lizzie Harding has joined us. Thank you very much, Lizzie, for joining us there. Lizzie is a principal consultant at and she's a specialist for digital recruiters and working within technology and telco sectors. Is that telco?
Yes, telecoms, tech startups, anything in sort of Silicon Roundabout area, that sort of thing.
Fantastic. Well, it'd be good to hear your take on networking, Lizzie. Handing over to you.
Thanks, Andrew. Hello all. I think I just wanted to sort of start up because Andrew was talking about best networking and actually it really has influenced where I am today in my career. I was actually working in rural Ireland a couple of years ago and working for a completely different company, taking a year out from the rat race, and I actually met a new client for the business that I was about to leave and return to London to, a female young entrepreneur. She was actually Entrepreneur of the Year in technology, and sort of started up a conversation, and just by chance got on really well, told her I was coming back to London, and she said, come and see me, and basically I got a job out of it that turned into exposure to marketing, exposure to technology, and from there I sort of went into marketing, recruitment, etc. So it's really where I am today. So it just shows you there's opportunities everywhere. Network for me is particularly important, and it's very much about not knowing but who you basically can get contacts across different areas that you do job opportunities, quite simply. So although you're often representing your company, potentially, you're always representing yourself. And that's a really important thing to know about networking, whether it's face-to-face or digital. For me, making new contacts and the best way to go around it, within a physical networking environment, and we've all covered it off, because even though I am very much an advocate for digital, I still think everything shouldn't be 100% digital. I think the face-to-face communication has to inevitably come with any business relationship, so you need to get used to that kind of environment. So within that sort of environment, if you're going to a networking event, for God's sake, never be shy. Please do not sit in the corner and sort of munch on the free sausage rolls that are coming with the buffet. Make the most of the fact that the attendees are there and it's actually specifically there for networking. So by going up to a complete stranger and saying, hello, that's totally normal. It'll be a bit different at a bus stop every morning, but in that sort of environment, it's absolutely fine. So it's about confidence first of all, but also when asking questions, making sure that you listen. Don't interrupt, don't overtalk people, and show that you're obviously engaged, even if you aren't, because that person, for all you know, could be the CEO of the next big thing. Think about someone like Mark Zuckerberg, for example, who was once a young geek, was incredibly shy, and was viewed as socially inept, hence Facebook. So However, how it works with events, you also have to be quite, I suppose, quite forced in the fact that you are not there just to speak to one person for the whole night. You also need to be quite rigid in thinking that you need to move on. So I would suggest 5 to 10 minutes tops when speaking to someone. You can very politely sort of make your way, but again, it's perfectly acceptable. And just don't get too comfortable within one conversation. So make sure that you can do things such as speed networking. There's a lot of networking events now that are known as speed networking, and as with speed dating, kind of work in a very similar way. Don't be afraid to ask for business cards, whereas I do find that more and more people don't tend to have business cards. But just make sure you make a note of names, because there's nothing more frustrating than you meeting a fantastically great person and then forgetting their surname or not getting the spelling right, because you'll hopefully want to connect with them digitally the next day. From a digital perspective, for me, there are 5 main channels, and probably being a professional recruiter within the business world, it's probably no surprise that the biggest channel for me is LinkedIn initially. I don't know whether all of you have LinkedIn accounts, probably not for the most part, but when you do go to set up a LinkedIn account, it's really important to get your profile right. So that will be from a picture. And I've just realised I haven't moved on the slides, but using my picture on this slide is great for my company website, great for our brand, just so you know. So for me, it's about, sorry, I'm just going back to the making contacts bit. When you're talking about LinkedIn, as well as photos, make sure it's kind of a very professional kind of a headshot ideally. You would not be surprised at the amount of LinkedIn photos that I've seen girls in bikinis or guys dressed as drag for a bit of fun. That's absolutely fine for Facebook, but not for LinkedIn, just a hint there. Also make sure that you're showcasing your education, your experience, any recommendations you might have, because people do look at this. Potential business partners look at this, potential employers look at this. It's really, really important. Only connect with people that you have some sort of common ground with, that they will recognise you from one place or another. Do not connect with total strangers, because generally it's seen as bad etiquette. So as long as you can do maybe an intro that's acceptable, you kind of need to stay away from that. If you've met them obviously at a networking event the day before, for example, try and connect with them the following day. Don't let it lag. When you do connect, make sure that you click on the relevant field, and make sure you include a very sort of short, very polite note about why you're keen to connect with them, and why you feel it will be beneficial. Although in certain industries, like I say my own, it's very much about the size of your network and the amount of contacts you have. If you're not within a natural sort of sales or sort of marketing job in that sense, I would always say go with quality of contacts over quantity where possible. Now on to one I'm sure you're all familiar with, which is Facebook. I suppose the first question I'd ask is how well do you know your Facebook friends? Are all people on there genuine friends that you share an interest in there? You know, that's the first thing. And just because, you know, someone's added you on LinkedIn, you're not going to necessarily add you on Facebook. So all I would say is if you are sort of really into your Facebook account from a social engagement level with your friends, as it's meant to be, you might perhaps want to so someone friends you, because if someone wanted to connect with you on LinkedIn and Googled your name, it's highly likely that your Facebook account could come up, and if it's open, they don't necessarily want to see drunk pictures of you from Saturday night. But I think it's a fantastic channel as well, and I think the one thing that's good about Facebook, particularly if you're in certain areas of business such as marketing, is you can get some really, really useful news articles out there that you can go on to share through LinkedIn and other channels. Twitter, I would say follow brands that genuinely interest you, and you'll be surprised. If you follow even big brands, they'll follow you back. I started following Sainsbury's the other day because I bought a salad at lunchtime that was frozen, took a picture of it, tweeted them, complained, and I literally got an immediate response back, a refund, we're so sorry, and they started following me, so it does work. Instagram, for any of you people that are out there and keen into photography, again, these photos are public, based on the market that you're wishing to attract to your Instagram account. And Pinterest, for me, Pinterest is a great channel because it's very much a mood board. For me, it's an extension of your personality. With regards to LinkedIn, Facebook in general, I think if you want to engage your audience and sort of continue networking through those channels, share stories, write blogs, comment on posts, retweet. That is the best possible way that you're really, really going to get that engagement out there through different people. So I'm going on to the next slide now, which is about attitude, and I'm going to keep it really simple. For me, it's a few things: positivity, openness, treat others how you would wish to be treated. Unnecessary rudeness for me will come back and haunt you. Sometimes you'll be unbelievable how many times you speak to people and they're quite short with you. You'll pass, I guarantee you will probably cross in the future. Be engaging, be transparent, ask more. No. And then when it's coming on the opposite side of that to asking open questions, it sounds really simple, but asking questions with the who, the what, the why, the when, the how. Who do you work for? What do they do? You're definitely, from questions like that, you're definitely going to get more of a detailed answer as opposed to a bog standard yes or no. And really help keep the conversation going and keep the engagement levels there as well. So that's it from me. It's been fairly short and sweet, but if there's any questions, let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lizzie, for giving us your hints and tips there. Yes, if anybody does have a question, then please just post it in the chat. I'm interested maybe to hear, Lizzie, just to have an idea about if you are that shy person, and I think there is that idea, isn't there, that we started to talk about, and Wendy was mentioning it earlier, with if you're at a networking event or you're at an event where it's expected that you will actually be taking part in something that is introducing yourself, then that's why it's the normal thing to do. Go ahead and do it and practice, try it out. Have you any hints or tips that perhaps you can think of sharing, that if you're not an extrovert, what can you do to put yourself in that zone?
I think if you go prepared to a extent, you know, questions like, you know, what do you do where you work, or you know, what's your purpose of being here? They're fairly standard questions that aren't really going to offend any of the attendees. And if you're shy, I have to say that probably standing in the corner at the buffet table eating sausage rolls, not talking to anyone, is probably going to, you know, show you off more than actually just engaging in a conversation than what is expected. But, you know, people love nothing more than to talk about themselves half the time. So if you plant a few really good open questions, they'll do all the talking, you know, and you're there, you're engaged.
That's great. That's good to hear that from you, to say, you know, to give it a go if you haven't perhaps given it a go before. Would like to ask you about, as a recruiter, when you're in your day-to-day job, what you're doing, and you're looking specifically for those digital jobs, as I know that's your speciality and that's your area of expertise, what do you look for on a LinkedIn profile if the people on the webinar today are thinking about setting up their profile, or perhaps they've had a go at it? What are those key things that, because it's like a CV, isn't it? You're looking at it quickly, you're looking through things. What would you as a recruiter be looking for as you look at it as a LinkedIn profile?
Do you know what? It's a few things. First of all, if they've got a dodgy picture, that already puts a question of doubt in my head. So back to my point about presenting yourself in a, a reasonably, you don't want to take away from your personality, but you also need to realise the purpose of using LinkedIn. A sensible picture that gives it your personality is definitely important. I recruit for marketing. The amount of people that have profiles that are talking through their work history, talking through their education, that have typos, that have grammatical errors. Because of the type of people that I recruit, that instantly puts me off, if I'm being really honest. But also just just an overview of basic work experience, key responsibilities, maybe an overview of what your company does if it's not very well known, key achievements in each role. I'm literally talking a few bullet points for each. Education, obviously, if you're at a certain level. And actually, what's great about LinkedIn is, you can get referrals from LinkedIn, and I'm not saying you have to go crazy, but even 2 or 3 really carefully laid referrals that are displayed in the public domain. Basically, you've got references that say about how great you are, either as a person or a student or as an employee. It's there, and it helps with confidence levels, I think. They're the main things.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that, Lizzie. And just a reminder to our attendees this evening is please do post any questions on Twitter. You can use the hashtag STS14, STS14, and we can pick those up afterwards or later on as well. But thank you, Lizzie, for the moment, for joining us and for sharing your information. I hope you can stay online just until we finish the call. That would be great. I'm going to hand over to Leigh now. I know I'm going to move forward our slides here. I'm just going to move over from the poll, and because I know Leigh's got some good things to talk to us about. Leigh is, I've got some interesting things in my profile here for Leigh. It's good to have you here, Leigh. Thank you for joining us. So you gained your PhD at Imperial College in nanoparticle development.
I did.
In the metabolic and molecular imaging lab, and we're pleased to have you here on the Student to Stemette webinar for your industry background. So you're currently head of preclinical operations at Global Acorn. So thank you very much for joining us, and I'll hand over to you now, Leigh.
Thank you for the invite. So first, I think Wendy and Lizzie were great, and they gave really great advice and tips. So I'm going to start off briefly with a quick backstory to how I got here, because a lot of that did involve networking. I did my PhD at Imperial College in a lab, in the metabolic and molecular imaging lab. And doing a PhD was a wonderful experience. One thing you never get taught is how important networking actually is. You kind of focus on how, the best way to be successful is to generate really good science, which is completely correct. But networking is, I feel, just as important to putting you on a projection for a successful career. So a few examples of how I found networking very successful and helpful is, so I worked on nanoparticle development, and towards the end of my PhD, I was approached by the MRC tech transfer to patent the nanoparticle for commercial development, potentially. So they wanted to put us in meetings to discuss, okay, how does commercialization of, a product like this would work, which I had zero experience with. So sitting in some of these meetings, people had brought up, let's get some VC money together. So in the middle of a very big meeting, I put up my hand and said, I'm sorry, I don't know what VC means. And they said, venture capital. I said, oh, okay, that's an interesting field. What does that mean? So later started to be introduced to the world of venture capital and how that works with commercial development of scientific discoveries such as my nanoparticle. So towards the end of my PhD, I started going to a lot of networking events, career events, And you just have to start branching out and going to these career sessions. Something like this, like a webinar, is a wonderful way just to being introduced to the experience, because you start to hear other people's stories and what path they took and what sounds interesting. So I went to one seminar session that discussed the commercialization of drugs, small molecules, diagnostics developed in the academic labs environments and how they get actually put into commercial work. And it was being put on by a venture capital firm. So at the end of that meeting, you know, I listened to all the speakers, and it's always good to listen to the speakers and come up with questions that you might want to ask them later at the end. So sitting there reading the stories or listening to the stories, I kind of said, okay, these are the key people that I really want to speak to at some point, because, you know, they touched upon something that I'm very interested in, and I have no idea what that meant. So it's always good to just approach people, be honest, introduce yourself. Hi, I'm Leigh. This is my background. I really liked your talk because of X, Y, and Z. And can you please explain to me what that meant? Because it's really okay to be honest about these things, and they don't expect you to know their field, and that's the best way to get introduced to it. So during one of these meetings, I went up to somebody who ran a venture capital firm and said, hi, I am Leigh. This is my background. I've been reading about venture capital. I'm very interested. How do you get into that field? And gave me some tips, and I asked for a card. That is one tip I learned. Always ask for a business card. Always, always. You just want to have their contact details, because you never know when you might have a question, or, you know, 2 days later say, oh, actually, you know, now I'm curious. I have a few questions I've thought of, and that's okay to reach out. So I did. I reached out to a few people in venture capital and said, hi, I'm Leigh. We met the other day. You know, do you have time to get a coffee? I have a few questions I'd like to ask about your field. And I was lucky enough to get a call and said, okay, I have 30 minutes for a phone call. So took the call, and the first question was, who are you? I forget. And, you know, that's okay. That's going to happen. You meet a lot of people, and it's not to be discouraged, because sometimes networking can be stressful and a little nerve-wracking. But through my networking, I spoke to them and had some other interviews and some, you know, caseworks, and I ended up getting a really good job as a consultant at a venture capital firm. So towards the end of my PhD, I had that wonderful opportunity, and also in parallel was approached by a small startup company, Global Acorn, who wanted to acquire the patent of the nanoparticle that I developed. So through my networking, I was able to have two very different experiences using my PhD in very different ways. So one was in venture capital, where you use your background of scientific knowledge to know how to carry out due diligence. And in doing so, that your networking, it becomes very important, because you are looking into fields that you might have never even knew existed. But by reaching out to people, speaking to people, getting their opinion, you get a good sense of, you know, what is a potential good idea or not. And a big part of fields outside of PhD, such as venture capital, networking is crucial, pivotal, and is dependent on your success there, I think, in a lot of ways. And then getting into industry, you're developing a product, and at least in my case, it was a very small startup company. So part of doing that was fundraising and learning actually how to develop a product, because I had no experience whatsoever. So by doing so, I just looked up a lot of events to go to, and to go just sit in, hear what people have to say, meet people, reach out. And the one nice thing is that, you know, no one is going to say your question is stupid or your question is irrelevant, because it's a good catalyst for a conversation, and you get to know people. And, you know, you really have you develop a relationship with somebody, and that's how networking really does develop. And part of you can create a small network out of that situation. So, you know, if you go to a conference, let's say, and you talk to 10 people throughout the evening, and then on the 11th person, they say that they're interested in talking about or meeting this person that you've just spoken to. So it's important to maybe help someone else make that connection. And doing so, you know, people will remember that you did that. And people always remember the approach that you took. And, you know, that you're open, that you engage, that you ask questions. And like I said before, when you do meet people, you always take a business card. And the one suggestion I have is to, email back and connect with them, because it is always good to keep a connection and, establish some sort of relationship with them, so that if any time, like I said before, you can reach back out. I learned that I went to the JP Morgan Healthcare Conference in San Francisco this past January, and I got 97 business cards. And the only reason I know that number is because I sat on the flight back and drafted 97 emails saying, thank you for meeting me. This is who I was. It was nice to meet you. And then went to LinkedIn and connected with them, because, that was such a really wonderful experience. And people will remember you and say, oh, I met this girl. She was, we had a conversation about this at this conference, and you'll see them again. Because the world is actually a lot smaller than you think. And when you get into some of these environments and social circles, you will see the same people again. In the academic setting, it goes to conferences. So, if you're in one subject like nanotechnology, I will see the same people at the conferences year in, year out at different conferences. And that will not change as you get older, because you're going to be in, maybe it's not in nanotechnology, but that same situation where you will come across the same people. So developing networks is really important, because it's a good way to see what else is new. You get ahead, you meet people, and those are strong things. One thing also not to, one thing to keep in mind is also your close friends can actually be a good way to have external networking. So I am constantly asking my friends, where are they going? What are they doing? Is there any interesting event that I can come along to? Are they going to any interesting conference? Maybe they're going to a dinner party where there's a lot of people there who I have an interest in that field or in that topic. So you ask, okay, how do I'd love to go. And that's okay to ask, because you want to just, it's important to use your core people around you in the best way for both parties. So it is a healthy back and forth. Your approach should always, you want to be interesting and engage with them as much as they're going to get from you. So it's okay to come up, ask whatever questions you want, say your backstory, and you never know, they might be involved with other people or other situations or projects or collaborations that could help you. So, it's okay to tell your story a little bit. And one good thing of networking is that you also get to practice just that. So you practice introducing yourself, sector, because it is good, and practicing is important. So before I go to some big conferences, I actually will kind of make myself go to a social setting and go and introduce myself to people and say, okay, a small goal for myself is I'm going to meet and speak to 2 new people I've never met before, and just practice introducing yourself to people, because the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And you're going to walk into a room after 5 or 10 different meetings or conferences and say, okay, you know the drill almost, exactly, like speak to people, say hello. And you have a good little speech almost for what you do, if that makes you feel better. One very important thing is to always be polite and say thank you. Nobody will necessarily remember the most polite person, but everybody will remember the rudest person. So I have to say that I've been at some meetings and conferences that some people stand out from my mind, and not always for the good, but that's one tip. So I think that is the end of my quick story. I can't, let's see. Sorry, Andrew, I don't think we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yeah, there we go. Hello.
That's my first technical thing. That's great. So.
Sorry, I thought I was doing something wrong on my end.
Thank you very much. No, it's my end. Yes, so it's very interesting to hear you talking about going up to speakers and introducing yourself. That's an interesting thing, and thinking about all the different situations that we've heard about this evening from our speakers, and being in different situations, that actually you can do that at any time. Do it at a conference, do it at a meeting, go up and introduce yourself and ask a question and put yourself out there, which is a good thing. And I think you can overcome that shyness, because if you're in that networking situation, then it's something that you can put yourself forward and do that. And also asking for a card, I think that's very important. I have a poll. While we share the poll, if anybody's got any other questions that they want to ask, then please put that out there. Let's put the poll up so people can have a look. And this was just thinking about the new things that we've heard about today, and an important skill. So if can everybody see the poll now on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got that new skill that you might be using in your networking, asking those open questions, making time to meet new people. We've heard a lot about making time in different instances. Talking about your strengths, we're talking about how you can play up to those, and we talked about that in previous webinars as well. And also about keeping people up to date on your achievements, so letting them know. So you were talking, Leigh, about how you let those people. So start voting, everybody. If you want to click those buttons. You were talking about getting in contact with those 97 people that you'd collected those business cards from, and then you're making those connections as you go forward. You can keep those people that you become better connected with. Like you were saying, Lizzie, on LinkedIn, you've got those people that you're having a bit more of a conversation with. Keep them up to date on what your achievements are. That's another way of sort of strengthening what it is. So there's a few people there adding their votes in. It's interesting, people are seeing what other people, I always like that part when people see what other people are voting, so they change their mind, which is all good. We all get to change our mind. So what have we got here? So what's one to come out tops? I think we've all talked about it in different ways, haven't we? Those open questions come out. So I think we've got everybody now. I think that's everybody that's voted. That's good. So I think that shows what we've been thinking about this evening, and how we might play some of those different things out. And you can prioritize those things as well, I think, which is good. You can think about testing them out in different ways. Close that down there. When you've been listening to what Leigh was saying, and Lizzie, was there anything that sprung to mind that you thought you might want to expand on a little bit from what you were saying earlier?
I don't know. I think it sounds like, for someone who goes to these networking events, Leigh sounds like a good, she's persistent, she'll make an impression, and like I say, I totally agree with the rudeness thing, it does come back to haunt you, but no, not really. I think, people have, we're all trying to get to the same goal at the end of the day. So I think, just like I say, don't be shy. I know it's easier said than done, but shyness can be perceived in a number of different ways. So just chat. That's what you're there to do. Be open, and don't drink too much. I don't think I said that. Trust me, that's a really.
I agree.
Yeah, it's that sort of, and you were saying about other things that keep the profile picture. You were saying keep that profile picture. It's that business style, isn't it? Having a different personas. It's not saying don't have a social persona, but have it in a different way. So I've had another question asked as well, which is about business cards, because it's interesting, isn't it? In this age when we've got an online profile, we might not actually have something which is printed. But Leigh, you were able to collect almost 100 cards there and get those off people. If you're thinking of making a business card, did you have one when you were a student? Leigh, did you have one before you perhaps needed one?
So I did not have one when I was a student. I didn't realize the potential of it. I would suggest people to get business cards while they're a student, yes, because what you do is you end up writing your email address to somebody and handing it to someone on a piece of paper that they're probably going to lose. I think it's a great idea, so I would highly suggest it.
Okay. But then on the other hand, if you don't have necessarily business cards to hand, or you can't afford them or anything like that, if you connect with them via LinkedIn the next day, they'll have your email address. And I'm sure that, it doesn't take a while, oh, Lizzie, that person, you can quickly search. So, I agree with Leigh, if you can have them done, it's great. And it's always good to have your social media channels referenced on your business card if you're worried for lack of information. But otherwise, if you connect with them via LinkedIn, they'll have your email address automatically. They can message you through it.
Of course. It does. It's both options, isn't it? And giving it a go. I think that's definitely what I've learned from this evening is have a practice. Take some of the different ideas and then have a practice, because it's the same with any of these things. We all had to start out at some point. and people within a networking situation will be very forgiving. And often people are very happy to talk about themselves. So, you know, if you catch them in the right way and you're polite and you're personable, then you can get people to talk to you about themselves, which is great. So there don't seem to be any more questions that are popping up. But if anybody wants to pop up another question in the chat, then I can ask that. And of course, you can use the hashtag STS14 afterwards, or this time, and we can filter those questions through at another time. That would be great to hear from you guys as well. So I'm going to sort of, as we're getting to the end, as we're getting to time, I know we will need to finish on time and move to the end slide. So thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you to attendees. Thank you, Leigh, for coming on and taking part. And thank you, Lizzie, very much as well. And thank you to Wendy, who joined us earlier as well. In the chat section there, we've got a feedback form, so please do give your feedback. Feedback is golden, so that's always good, and we'll send that out in an email as well. We will be posting up a recording of this session, so people can have a look back at the best bits and the highlights. And we're also adding these into a playlist, so we can dip in and out, which is great. So thank you all very much for joining us. If you can, as a presenter, if you can leave those end of meeting things free for me to finish off, and I'll tidy up, and I'll be here for another 5 or 10 minutes. But thank you very much once again, Lizzie, for joining us, and thank you, Leigh, for joining us too. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye now.